Hi. Okay, so this evening we have Trinity Pierce. She's the Stewardship Manager with the Chicago Region Tree Initiative. They're based out of the Morton Arboretum in Lisle. Trinity collaborates with communities to increase awareness of the importance and benefits of trees and foster action through plantings and ongoing maintenance in order to grow a healthier, more diverse urban forest. She's a certified arborist, holds a master's of landscape architecture from the University of Michigan, and has a background in history, ecological restoration, and urban green space reconciliation, which you would have read when you signed up for this evening. So rather than kind of doing this on the fly, I'm just kind of rereading what we've already told you. But anyway, so Trinity made the effort to come all the way up here, so we really appreciate that. And then we do have, she has quite a bit of literature in the back that's available for people to take. So please look at that. It's the front row as you're heading out. Make sure you check that out before you go. All right, thank you very much. And Trinity, it's all yours.
Thank you.
It's okay if it's technically backwards?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's what we'll just start talking to slides.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you all for having me. I'm very excited to be up here in Crystal Lake. Part of my master's project was actually with McHenry County Conservation District, so it's wonderful to be back up here. So today, talking about advocating for trees. I need to move over here. Okay, would someone maybe be able to advance the slides? Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Perfect. So there are many ways we can advocate for trees in our community. And of course, trees are only one component of our urban forests, of our urban communities. So a holistic view is critical, but trees are a great place to start. You know, I was having trouble too. I think we've got to hit these arrows down here.
Okay.
Yeah, there they are.
I need training.
No, perfect.
So yes now?
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so we'll start with the importance and benefits of trees. We're going to go ahead and focus specifically on Crystal Lake. We've got some great data about your canopy. Then we'll move into some wonderful native trees for different layers of the forest, and end with some advocacy resources and stewardship opportunities. At any time you have questions, ideas, please feel free. So some of us had the fortune to grow up on trees with streets lined with trees like this. And in many cases, elms might come to mind, those cathedral-like setting, the vase-like, and no worries, I was having the same thing. So I'm glad that you're struggling with it and not me. So, and that's no problem. Absolutely, I appreciate it. However, we know that trees are not equitably distributed in our area. So many folks do not grow up with this kind of setting, but our goal is to not only make trees more equitable, make them more abundant, make them more diverse. So you can go ahead and do the next if you can. Yeah, I think you've got to find those tiny arrows. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're in.
Perfect. So anyone, please go ahead and shout out, what are some of the benefits trees provide for us? Shade, yes, especially in August.
Oxygen.
Oxygen. What else about oxygen? More. Yes, and yep, and they clean it. They actually absorb pollutant particles. What else? They cool our houses. Absolutely. What else? Soak up water. Yes. Slow down storm water. Habitat. Critical.
They are beautiful.
They are beautiful. Absolutely. Yes. Beautiful. Mental health. Critical. Soil stabilization. Great. What else? Homes for wildlife. Definitely. Excellent. So we know there are many, many benefits for trees. And with the theme of advocacy, some of us are going to value trees differently. Many of us in this room, I'm sure we had an epiphany, a moment with nature when we were growing up, and we've been, you know, that altered our course from that point. But again, knowing that not everyone's growing up with that experience, for some, it's going to be economic. It's going to be the value of the tree, increasing the property value. It's going to be environmental. And for many, it's going to be mental health. Can I access the green space that is in my area? Do I feel welcome in that space? So we can advocate for these spaces. We can also advocate to ensure everyone has access and is able to appreciate these benefits. Go ahead. And then specifically, of course, our heritage is oaks. So we talked about the importance of creating habitat that trees do, and oaks are a keystone species, bedrock for so many species in our area. There are some issues with oaks not regenerating like we'd like to see them. We know that in many of our natural areas with fire suppression, we've got maples, we've got redbud, and others who are crowding out our oak seedlings, which, you know, sometimes just need a little more TLC. They need much more sunlight than those species do. So how can we nurture and advocate for oaks, knowing how important they are to other trees as well? So value of trees, and we hit on all of these pretty much. So here we have flood susceptibility, surface temperature, air quality. And without a doubt, these three really significant harmful factors on human health, it's all going to correlate. And where there are trees, these are alleviated. As we discussed, helping slow and absorb floodwaters, cooling our temperatures, and air quality as well. And no surprise, what would those two blank spots be? Airports. Airports. And you can see the colors radiate out, the darker colors from those two locations. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, next, thanks. So our urban forest, much like ourselves, has to deal with a lot of stressors. So I know it might be a little hard to see in the back, but anyone want to call out, what are they seeing that might cause stress to our trees in our built environment?
Concrete.
Concrete. Power lines. Cars.
Pollution.
Pollution. Buildings.
Lack of doors.
Sewers.
Heat. Lack of insects.
Lack of access.
Insects.
Insects, absolutely. And there was another, what was the other one? Compression, yes, soil compaction, absolutely. What about when it's just snowed and somebody's liberally throwing salt? Some of our tree species do not like salt, and they really need to not be on the street for that reason. Other urban stressors we can think of. Heat, absolutely. People are a big one. Absolutely. So as stressful as we might find urban environments, you know, dealing with traffic or dealing with, you know, just people in a bad mood, trees also are dealing with this. Sometimes we call these death boxes. If they don't have a lot of space for their roots to grow, what effort are we putting in to plant this tree? Can it survive? In some very difficult situations, urban trees, some can have a lifespan as short as 7 years. So that is not the investment that we need to see in our trees. Okay, go ahead. So we have collected a lot of really helpful, important data. As with any problem, any project, we need to know what our baseline is. So our GIS mapping guru, Lindsay Darling, has been able to collect canopy data for every single community in the 7-county region. And we're able to then know, okay, where trees needed most, where are the areas for improvement, and how can we ensure that we are providing for a more resilient, more abundant, more diverse tree canopy overall. Okay, go ahead. So this is available online. You can look up any community in that 7-county region again. And so here we're looking at Crystal Lake. So overall, and it's a little hard for me to see I think this is 19%.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, excellent. We got people with good eyesight here. So McHenry County overall, 19% canopy, and there's a lot of great breakdowns of different land use types. And then Crystal Lake, we have at 25%. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is really helpful data, and we get it through LiDAR, ever more advanced LiDAR. It's to the point where they'll soon be able to differentiate different species from satellite overviews. But of course, the satellite's trying to help us out. So it's going to start just with land use. So it's going to think, oh, look at all these green spaces. and look at all these, you know, ballparks. And so it'll think, put all the trees in center field, right? Or in the soccer field. So then we have to, of course, overlay with land type and say, nope, you can't plant in center field of a ball field, but you can plant on the perimeter. And we see that there is so much potential for trees in any one community. Largely in part because if we were to think back to that view of the urban stressors, a lot of folks, again, might have a limited view of what trees in an urban environment are. They're going to think it's one tree every 20 feet on the parkway with turf. That's where a tree belongs. That's where it looks nice because I love my turf. But in reality, we need to have much more complex forest ecosystems in our urban areas. We can do it, but we do in part have to help change the perception of beauty. So along with that is the urban heat island. So if you can see this, and I will need some help here, can anyone roughly estimate where we are currently? Right, so we've got some kind of cool large area here and then congested, okay. That's Crystal Lake? Okay, so where are we in relation? So what's this? Three Oaks. Okay, so where are we now? In this angry red dot? That would make sense to me, trying to find parking. So this is really helpful because you know your community. And for those, even if you're not from Crystal Lake, maybe you're from the area, maybe you grew up here, but we can see where this is going to be more congested. Inevitably, this is going to be more built environment where wherever you get the lighter or into the blue, that's going to be water, that's going to be forest preserves, that's going to be parks. So this area, there's not a lot of reprieve from that heat. You get farther out, yes, but that helps us know where can we alleviate those higher temperatures overall. Any other, like, what is that? Any ideas? Or that one up there? That's pretty hot.
Where's round 14? It's probably 14 and 31.
And would that come like this or, okay. So try and kind of keep this in mind as we go to the next slide. So this is really helpful that we can see, and I'm not sure on the years without seeing it. I think is that 2010 and then 1838? 1938. Okay. So as much as we can tell, this is data on our oak ecosystems, the lime being about, you know, less than a century ago, and then the green being early, you know, 2010. So you can see how fragmented it is and how, of course, we are losing more and more of our natural area ecosystems. But what's critical for oaks especially is that they need to be able to connect. We need these corridors. We need the corridors for our wildlife and just to build that resilience. So again, thinking back to that urban heat island map, we were seeing bits and pieces of blue, lighter colors, but not connected. So how can we strategically, yes, plant trees, but also try to connect up those areas? Often they're going to be along rivers. That makes sense. But how else can we provide even neighborhoods, even residences, seeing yourselves beyond your fence line? How am I connecting, you know, east and west, north and south? Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving away from Crystal Lake specifically, we know that right tree in the right place is critical. That's where we focus on for a lot of our efforts. And there's a great search engine on the Morton Arboretum website, Trees and Plants. You can go in and get very specific filter. You can go down to soil tolerances. Do you have wetter soil? After a rain, do you have really soggy, wet grass, or you see standing water, or you don't see any wetness at all? We have trees that evolved in floodplains. They're going to want their roots kind of soaked. And we have trees, some of our oaks evolved upland, so they don't want anything to do with that wet soil. So even just that observation can really help. And some of the materials we have in the back are a great way to do that. So this selecting and planting trees pulls from that website, which is a lot. And then it's going to describe a lot of our most common trees. What's key is, yes, it goes through size and fall color characteristics you might think of, but it also goes through critical site tolerances. So soil tolerances, salt tolerances. That's really key when you're selecting a tree. You're investing in that tree. It's your time, respecting your time, hopefully the longevity of the tree. So this is a great resource. And then speaking of size, we know that we talked about power lines as a stressor. We have a lot of trees that, yes, will soar to 30+ feet like oaks, but we also have trees that are just fine staying at 25 feet or less, and they still contribute to our urban forest. So for us, LIDAR actually is utilizing a 10-foot mark. So anything that hits 10 feet, we're including in the canopy. So shrubby trees can absolutely contribute. So this is another resource, Healthy Hedges in the back. It's going to show you kind of the whole spectrum. Maybe you don't have room for an oak, but you might have room for a redbud. Yeah.
You mentioned power lines, and this is one of my pet peeves when we drive down the road and we see these trees that are pruned like this.
Yeah.
Or like this.
Right. Right.
And we always see the Asplund trucks, right?
Yeah.
Which are out there pruning these trees.
Mhm.
And what can we do? Because I feel like at a certain point, our municipalities and our counties and whatnot need to say, no, we're not going to hire people to prune those trees every year and make these trees into like Toulouse-Lautrec of trees, right? Let's just cut them down and not plant them. So is there
Right.
any initiatives about this? Because this is like, my husband laughs at me because he knows every time we get in the car, I'm going to start screaming about trees.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's tough to look away.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
No, how's the tree gonna grow when it's like a Y?
Right, exactly. So the folks who are coming after the planting, they've got a tough job because they likely didn't plant the tree. They didn't pick a maple or an oak for a space that's technically only a 30-foot clearance. So it really needs to start at planting because yes, we need our
Right.
utilities and that can cause a significant conflict. So it's spreading awareness. It's shrubby trees exist too, and some of them can handle street locations. So that's critical and just pushing
Are
as
there
much
any
as you can.
initiatives out there though, because to me, and maybe as I retire, this is what I'm going to go on the rampage about is pruning, a few pruning of trees, right?
Right,
Are there any initiatives out there already? I know, it's like, look out, because I'm gonna be like scary person on
You
it.
know, the community that I'm nearest that has the best street trees is Arlington Heights. And it's because they have a very professional team of people that are hired by their village. They have a true forestry department. And they, in my opinion, are the model for closer in suburbs that are more densely developed. I live in Palatine. We have a total loser as a village forester.
okay.
I don't know how pretty his, his,
Just cover this.
his,
one.
diploma from. I think he went to Trump University.
All right. So,
But anyways,
but-
what we do not have a good village forester. And he selects really crappy trees for the 50-50, tree program.
right,
That you can select from to begin with. It's all non-native stuff, Japanese tree lilacs, and crab apples unfortunately don't do well in parkways
True.
because they're not salt tolerant.
true.
So anyways, going back to that selection thing that she's been mentioning. And so your village forester is hugely important.
True.
And then you can't really put the blame on the contractors because ComEd is ruthless. In Palatine, I literally go out when their trucks show up and I'm like, time out,
Right.
time out.
Right.
Please don't
Grading
butcher my
train,
trees.
So I hear you, and there are many great points to pull from both of you. So yes, first things first, not all communities have a forester on staff, much less a forestry budget line. So that's already a very difficult situation. And then, yes, what are the trees available to you? So as residents, absolutely, you can advocate for, we need to review this list. We need to ensure there aren't invasive or crappy trees on it that aren't going to do well. And the city too wants to invest in these trees. And then, yes, by the time that pruner has come to make sure there's not a conflict with the utilities, sadly, it becomes an aesthetic issue. Yes, the tree might look horrible, but it's still providing benefits to some degree, and it's not conflicting with the utility. But we've got to get it when we're planting, plant the right tree there. Yeah.
So these forestry departments, do they have an arborist on staff that might be able to listen to these concerns on multiple aspects, environmental and aesthetics, rather than just these that come out there and cut it because they have a license?
Right. So the reality is every community does not have a forestry or arborist on staff. They don't even have funds for trees. Often the streets and sanitation folks are just having to take care of trees because there's nobody else. So a lot of our work with Chicago Region Trees Initiative, yes, we're planting trees, but we're also providing education and training. So a key training coming up this September, we offer it every year, is urban forestry basic training. And while yes, it's geared towards folks who are caring for trees professionally, anyone can come. We need to empower residents to say, for a 50-50 program, these are not acceptable. This is what I want to see, and keep hammering that home. I'm sure many people will agree, I want to invest in that. So let's make sure we're getting the right trees.
And who's making these decisions? Because like you said, the best place to start would be at planting. Wouldn't the arborist be the person to suggest, well, based on this area, this type of tree that's reached this height, under these power lines, with this shade based upon these buildings?
Right. And what you're describing is the ideal situation.
Right, ideal.
Right. We consider trees, we know trees to be part of green infrastructure, but so often they're an afterthought. They're not considered in planning. They're thrown in. What's cheapest you're able to get, silver maples, for instance. So they're planting 100 silver maples. They're all the same age. So many of us now have aging out silver maples, often at times 7 out of 10 trees on a block. They all need to come down at the same time. That's exorbitantly expensive. So absolutely, that's what we're striving for, but we're not there yet. Yes.
The other thing that you can advocate for and keep pushing, burying the drops. We live out on a farm.
Oh, yeah.
Every time there's a storm, we lose power. Every freaking time. And ComEd knows where it is. Like, but we don't have enough people on our road, so it doesn't make sense. And blah, blah, blah. But you know what? It costs them a lot to continue to
Right.
repair.
Right.
And that would solve the problem.
Right.
So just advocate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So great points. Thank you all.
Yeah. Excellent.
So a couple more resources back there. Similarly, now we talked about the 25% for Crystal Lake. That's good. Our goal, again, ideal situation, every community is different, is 40% canopy. So that's looking up in the sky. If you could see the whole scope of the community, 40% of the sky is some kind of tree leaf canopy. It's not feasible for every community, but that's the goal. Now, of course, up here, you have an added exciting challenge. Anyone want to share? What could be an issue here that maybe we don't want here, but it's thriving and it's really hard to take care of? Buckthorn. So of your honeysuckle, yes, yes. So of your 25%, exactly. So of your, I like the elbowing on the side. It's like this. Okay, so 25% of your canopy, there's a whole lot of it that is going to be invasives. So 25% is exciting, but if we were to look a little closer, the canopy actually is not that healthy. So even more reason, even in more resourced areas on the north end of our region, need to take a look at, okay, what's the actual quality of our canopy? So this is a great resource. It's an invasive hedge and screen replacement guide. So these are all a variety of shrubs that can replace your buckthorn once you remove it. So another just very practical resource. And then lastly, we've got this great Under the Canopy poster. A lot of partners.
I got 9 cases of those in my office.
Oh, you're excellent, right? Right? But it's such a great resource.
So,
minded, because we're gonna either, the most common things we hear is tree down. So we work through that. But the second thing is, oh, well, I want a maple because I want a fast growing tree that has fall color. So use this, advocate for species diversity. There are so many more trees that have fall color besides maples. Maples are overplanted. We now have more maples than we ever did of ash. The loss of ash due to the Dutch elm, to the emerald ash borer was devastating. So what did we do after we lost our elms? We planted a whole lot of ashes and now a whole lot of maples. So we have to diversify, and these resources can help us do that. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. I'm sorry. Did I totally move away from the Zoom? Sorry about that. Okay, so next we're going to go through some layers because, again, our forests, our woodlands, our prairies, our savannas, these are complex ecosystems that are really good at caring for the earth holistically. We've really got to up our robustness in our urban areas, and we can do that. Going to go through some wonderful species for that. Any ideas on what any of these might be?
Buttonbush.
Buttonbush, excellent.
Is that Alana Sarah?
Dwarf fungus.
It is not. Good guess though.
Okay, is it a buckeye?
This is a buckeye, yeah.
Okay, and it's, no, not a service berry.
And it's not meant to stump you. This actually, many parts of this are edible, which I did not realize. It is not a service berry. Arboretum. So here's an example. Now this, some of our shrubby trees are going to get more bushy, so some don't make sense on a street area. But if you've got restricted space, if you're working with a school, a place of worship, and they're saying, I don't have room for a tree, again, are they picturing an oak tree? And they've closed that door without even realizing there's a lot more flexibility. So great example. And then always checking, okay, what's the value of this tree? What is it contributing to? Not just, yes, it's beautiful, absolutely, but is it edible? Again, up here, you're not necessarily dealing with food desert issues, but we can all eat more healthy food. If it's producing that healthy food, not only for humans, but for habitat, that's enhancing our communities. And again, always making sure to check, okay, is it going to thrive where I'm planting it, or is it only going to eke out a living, bad windstorm and it's out, as opposed to a robust plant that can handle the stresses of our urban environment. So moist, well-drained soil, that's pretty kind of just down the road, kind of like a Goldilocks for us. That's not too wet, not too dry. We're very fortunate that the majority of a lot of our native trees and plants can handle that kind of middle ground, but we also have some on the wet and dry spectrum, which we'll see. Okay, go ahead. So yes, buttonbush we got. I could go on this, and actually if you go ahead and just do quick the next one, and then we'll come back to this one. So if you're familiar with Illinois Wildflowers website, wonderful, wonderful resource that it is going through plants. And then for instance, this is an entire chart of bird species that utilize buttonbush. So trees, not just for the benefits they provide for us, but how are they enhancing the environment? So if you want to go back to the next one. Perfect. No, no problem. You're right. I think if you click, yeah, it'll appear again. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Okay. So again, we're seeing this kind of shrubby tree layer that works really well, and it's going to get that partial sun shade, so it doesn't need that full sun. So many wildlife benefits. And then here we're seeing even tolerating occasional flooding wet sites. So if you know in your mind where your community garden or your place of worship or your residential property, oh yeah, that corner gets a bit wet and there's not full sun, I didn't know what to put in there. Maybe I'm going to put buttonbush as opposed to another hydrangea. Now hydrangeas and hostas, they have a place. It's easy to divide hostas, that's economical. Just make sure that your entire yard isn't hostas, just like we wouldn't want our entire block to be maples. So always within reason, diversifying our plants. Okay. And then go ahead and do 2. Sorry. Oh yeah, if you want to. No, I don't need it. No, no, I'm sorry. I'm been making you struggle. Yeah, you can even like take it.
Keep on going.
Okay. So Buckeye, yes, Buckeyes are absolutely wonderful shrubby trees, really important for a lot of our wildlife. And again, partial sun to full shade. And in certain cases, yes, they can be on parkways. We see a lot of these Buckeyes on parkways, and they're not going to conflict with power lines. Okay, next. Okay, so moving into the lower canopy, any ideas on these? Witch hazel, redbud, persimmon. No.
Black off my
Black off I've heard of. No, no. The Latin genus is Nyssa.
black, sweet gum.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, or Tupelo. Tupelo is another one. Name. Great. All right, let's move on. So witch hazel, a wonderful smaller tree in the lower canopy, all the way to full shade. So again, if somebody's like, you know, I got a wooded lot, what can I put in there? All they have is really tall hickories and oaks, and then they've got some lovely spring ephemerals. How about some more complexity? Witch hazel is a great example. And then wonderfully, it's blooming not when when you'd least expect it in the off season. So a great example, edible. So many parts of these plants are edible. How are we making our own eating habits more sustainable? Let's forage from our own plants. Okay, go ahead. Redbud, absolutely. Anyone know why do redbuds in the spring look so brilliant? No leaves, absolutely. So that it flowers right on the branch, on the twig before the leaves come out. So it's going to be just a flame of pink. Not always the case. Often leaves are coming out before the flowers. Edibility, grab it, throw it in your salad. Another way to value redbuds. Interestingly, oftentimes seen as almost a specimen, like a lone, beautiful aesthetic tree. But if you're driving or running, walking through forest rows in the spring, you're going to see so many hints of pink. That's redbud. It doesn't need a lot of sun to germinate, and then it's actually crowding out our oaks. So as wonderful as redbud might be to many folks, especially the heart-shaped leaves, it's an absolutely beautiful tree. The inner red, orangish bark as it gets older. At times, natural areas restoration involves thinning out redbuds because there's just too much of a good thing. So balance in all things. Okay, go ahead. And then persimmon. Anyone harvested persimmon off the tree? It's hard to beat the raccoons and other wildlife to get just the right. Yes, so that's a good question. We're not persnickety about Chicago region for native. We're going to look at Illinois, and then depending, we might look at the Midwest. And that's in part due to, you know, climate change, knowing that some southern species are doing better. Oh, absolutely. We plant it. Yeah. Yeah. And we've got quite a few at the Arboretum. I'm sure there are some at Chicago Botanic Garden. So this is a great native hardy fruit producing tree. A lot of folks aren't familiar with persimmon or pawpaw. They're thinking apple trees or pear trees. And yes, those have a place again, but these are more hardy. These are going to be able to handle our winters. And this is wonderful just to share with folks, especially community gardens, or if you just want to add more complexity to your space. Okay. So here's an example. I know we are very far north, but if you ever are coming to the Arboretum, we have wonderful website resources. Any of these plants, you can look and find their webpage, and this is where these are located at the Arboretum. It's a great way to kind of figure out, okay, what's the habit, the form of this tree, what's going on with it? Is this something I'm interested in? Just enjoyable to learn. Of course, Arboretum also has wonderful education courses. This Saturday, I'm teaching woodland trees. So it's a great place to learn, to get inspired, to bring a field trip of your green drinks, folks. There's also alcohol served, so you could do a green drinks down there. You got to take a shuttle, enjoy the hour-plus long ride, and then get our arbor wine. Okay, next. Yeah, so even more so on that, Arboretum and Chicago Botanic Garden, any of these kind of green spaces that you can come to. Of course, all these trees are going to be recorded in some way or accessioned. Again, really helpful on the south side of any of our plants. There is going to be a label, easy for learning that, and fun to kind of build field trips or just learning walks around that. Okay. Okay, so Tupelo, I argue Tupelo has more brilliant fall color than any maple, and it can be hard to find them, but they are absolutely beautiful trees.
And this is native here in our region.
Really? Yeah, just lesser known. So maple gets all the credit, all the attention, and we've got to spread awareness about these trees. Okay. All right, heading to the upper canopy, which understandably, a lot of folks are going to think of, well, that's a tree, which is fine, but we have these smaller layers as well. Not meant to trick you. Any ideas what this could be? It is an oak. It is not red. This is hackberry, absolutely, as if somebody stuck popcorn to the bark. It is a name. It's somebody's name. Starts with an S. Not scarlet. Not shingle.
No, it's not a shingle oak, I know. Scarlet's not.
Not scarlet. It's not scarlet. All right, and then any ideas on that one? It is a hickory. Nicely done. Not shagbark. Our theme is edible,
Butternut.
and I just love a pie in fall. Pecan. Hard to grow. They start with a taproot. Hard to find, but really important for our historical heritage of oak hickory forests. Okay, go ahead. It is shoe-marred oak.
Oh.
Southern. Comes from Southern Illinois, is doing really well up here. Yes, and it's interesting, it's kind of a double-edged sword because we get these southern species, but then we get a really bad, like a polar vortex, and they're like, nope, no thanks. Can't handle this. So it's that balance again. So here's a great example of an oak that can handle occasional drought, one spectrum, all the way to wet sites, not occasional flooding, but wet sites is pretty darn good for oaks. I mean, outside of swamp white oak, who's just a generalist and wonderful, a lot of our oaks are going to be more upland. So that's really helpful to have. Okay. Hackberry. So hackberry does actually have a hackberry. If you can reach it, you can eat it right off the tree, and the fruit persists, which is really critical for wildlife in the winter. And then again, another generalist, really useful, all the way from dry sites, occasional flooding, road salt, wet sites, clay soil. That's really helpful to know in a pinch. And then here again, here we're seeing the hackberries. If you go to the hackberry webpage, you're going to be able to find that map right on that page. Really useful. Okay. And then pecan, absolutely beautiful, a huge tree. So you don't have the space, that's understandable. Best often in parkway areas and full sun. It's going to start with a taproot, but as with all trees, and that's a great observation, where are the majority of tree roots? Drip line, absolutely, in the top 18 inches of soil. So that gets back to how devastating soil compaction can be. You see construction happening, you see huge piles of material 10 feet away from a tree. That's causing significant stress on the root's ability to get oxygen, to get air underground. So yes, start with a taproot. That's why it makes transplanting hard to grow. These are expensive for us. For us, it could cost upwards of $300 to buy a 15-gallon hickory at 1.5 inch caliper, kind of this tall. So that's an investment. Okay. All right. So finishing up with some advocacy resources. So we've got some great hubs, kind of collections of resources online at chicagorti.org. Tree advocacy, starting with kind of all the basics of empowering, getting the resources you need to make a difference. Yes, it's wonderful if you can plant a tree on your own property or in your own community garden, your place of worship, your community center, but what are you doing to inspire your neighbor or to inspire your community, your municipality, to get that list updated? We also know that a lot of communities don't even have tree protection ordinances. So my stewardship cohort, we work from the bottom up. So we're working with community organizations like yourselves. We are grassroots and we're excited to get as hyper-local as we can. My counterpart, Zach, works from the top down. So he's working with municipalities. We know, once again, we need that holistic approach, we could have a wonderful tree planting, and then the next day somebody could come through and just bulldoze them all if there aren't protections. And that's really demoralizing. So we definitely need both. Homeowner hub, again, gets even more specific about hiring an arborist, and then what can you do if you're seeing X's on trees, the dreaded X, it's probably too late to save them. So have you been going to the town meetings? Have you been aware of what development's going on? Are they factoring in age-old trees that may need to be saved? And then especially up here, invasive species hub, because buckthorn is just rampant. And there are ways that we all can be, IDing, aware of them. We still get folks who say, oh, you mean my really nice hedge? It's like, well, your hedge is problematic. And then for folks who might be bordering a forest preserve, or your neighbor is oblivious to it and you've worked tirelessly to eradicate from your property, and you can kind of watch in real time the seedlings come over, that can be frustrating. So how can you advocate without alienating your neighbors? So we have many volunteer planting events. We have outreach events, pruning workshops, mulching workshops, trainings. Anyone's welcome to. You can find that on our CRTI events calendar. And then there's one note I wanted to make. I think it was Pat, who we were talking about. Really great point about, we see a lot of splashy trillion tree campaigns or billion tree campaigns. Let's all go out and plant trees. As we've talked about, you've got to get the right tree in the right place. What's the value? What's the investment in planting? That's why for us, we're planting, the smallest we plant is 1 gallon, but the majority is going to be a 15-gallon size container tree. We know that has much better chance of survival, but it's who we're working with, who's responsible for those trees. Are they caring for them, ensuring that they are growing? We know that some of those gorgeous mature trees are so efficient, unlike gray infrastructure. The older they get, the more value they accrue. So if we were to lose, like that pecan we were looking at, we lost it, but we replanted it, it will be decades before that young tree can even compare to the benefits that tree provides, including carbon sequestration. So critical to really take the time, right tree in the right place, invest all that carbon that got that tree to where you are. Let's make sure the trees survive. So thank you all so much. Any questions, please feel free. Yeah.
Do you have
Okay.
any words of hope regarding spongy mold and oak wilt?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Any words of hope regarding spongy moths
And oak wilt.
and oak wilt? So our oaks overall have been taking a beating. Absolutely. Dealing with regeneration issues and then a lot of diseases. So all we can say is the more folks who are aware of it and observing it, monitoring it, the better. So community science really makes a difference here, as does replanting. We're replanting a diversity of oaks. That's a key for us, that keystone species. So to continue to do that, and then just keep asking questions like that. But yeah, it's alarming, it's sad, yeah. But we got to keep planting, keep researching, and we can all participate in that.
I'll follow up on my lovely wife's question. Does oak wilt cycle through eventually? Does it leave an area so that the little guys we're planting will get a chance?
Yes, but it is a bit of a race. And Tricia Bethke, who is our wonderful pest and disease expert at the Arboretum, I say it's getting to the right expert. So we are continuing to plant, hoping that science is going to catch up with some way to kind of slow it, if not stop it. And a great example is there is hope in the elms. So yes, we were devastated by Dutch elm disease, but we now have many different cultivars that are more and more resistant to Dutch elm disease. So while they might not get the stature of the cathedrals, they still have some of the critical native characteristics, and we are able to plant those. Other questions?
Are there subsidies for communities if we put something out in the neighborhood saying, you can choose from these 10 trees? Are there discounts that we could offer people?
Yes. Are there subsidies or discounts that we can offer to folks if you put out kind of a campaign to try and plant trees?
Neighbors to plant.
So it depends. Is it going to be on that park row, which is city property between the sidewalk and the road, or this is kind of anywhere in private property?
This is an athletic club with individual cottages. The property is owned collectively. And
Okay.
it's all just grass and trees. We've taken a lot of trees down, a lot of ash,
Okay,
and some of our very old oaks are coming apart.
right, understandable.
So we're trying to replace.
Yes, so there will be opportunities, especially through the Inflation Reduction Act. If anyone's familiar with, a whole lot of money has come to a lot of our urban forestry work. So we're hoping to be in so many of our grant writing where it passed through. So we're able to take on the admin of managing larger federal grants, and then the majority of the funds get to communities who need it. So working with a group like that, absolutely, that's something that we could explore. It's recognizing though that technically, is it in Crystal Lake?
It's in McHenry County.
Okay, okay. So it's just balancing that. This may not be considered an under-resourced area. We know though that in any area, there's going to be vulnerable populations. So it's understanding at that local level, maybe this group cannot afford to buy 50 trees out of pocket. How can we help? Maybe you can raise money for 50% of that.
Yeah.
And through CRTI, we are buying in bulk already. So for us, all the work involved, it's going to be about $400 a tree, but that's involved, that includes staff time investment. So if you do a distribution model, that's more like 200, 250 a tree. You have to take on more of the logistics, but that's doable. Like we'd start with a demonstration planting. Everyone's on the same page, proper planting. Again, we're investing in this. We're going to make sure it survives. And then folks can take their trees, go plant them themselves.
Yeah.
There's also the sapling adoption where it's those 1, 5, or even 7 gallon trees where they've gotten over that initial hard, hump of when they're just sticks.
Yeah.
So more survivability, and that distribution is much easier to do, even depending, could be $50 per sapling. It's accessible. People can throw them in their sedan. A lot of folks can dig that hole. But we know that planting trees like maples get a lot of the attention in urban forestry, but it's also advocating, it's having ordinances, it's having management plans, it's that holistic aspect. But happy to talk more about that potential.
Okay, thank you.
Any programs for individual homeowners? Like we've got a big empty lot in front, no trees really, but I'm sure but you plant something, are there any programs or incentives for?
Absolutely. So the question is, for residential property, are there any programs to plant trees? So that would also follow a distribution model where you would need to take on as a point person kind of some of the logistics. You're reaching out, you're recruiting folks to take trees. But then yes, we could create that program, and we're able to source many of the trees I listed because we're buying in bulk from nurseries who are focusing on natives in the region as much as possible. So yes, that's definitely a possibility. And then some of the advocacy hub or these other areas can help too. Maybe you think, oh, maybe I have 10 people in mind who might be able to take trees. How can we build that up to 30 or 40 people? We can start with outreach. One of our main goals for CRTI is inspiring people to value trees. So tree walks, presentations like this, we know this is critical to build momentum. Not everyone's ready to plant trees. Not everyone has the capacity to plant trees, but let's start with inspiration and then ensure everyone can come to the table and sustainably care for their trees. So that's a great question. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
To follow up on your question, sorry. Anyway, here in McHenry County, there are 2 places, 2 organizations that use tree sales as fundraisers, and they have native trees at very reasonable prices. And those are the Land Conservancy of McHenry County and the Friends of Bulla Bog. And they have a sale each spring for both organizations. And
The Land Conservancy.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Today.
So we had additional, we've got some local resources, the Land Conservancy, and then Friends of Vola Bog. I grew up going to the Vola Bog. I'm so glad they fixed that boardwalk, right? That took a while. I'm so glad they got the funding. So that's excellent resources.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, and the Land Conservancy sale just is starting, and it's conservemc.org. So it's a great place to get native trees, shrubs, and native flowering plants.
Perfect. Conservemc.org. Just opened up today. So get your plants there and invest. So maybe you decide, okay, I'm gonna divide some more hostas so I can go there and get plants. Nothing against big box stores, but they're going to have a very limited quantity.
Yeah.
And oftentimes maybe cultivars that were cultivated for aesthetics and not necessarily disease resistant. So not all cultivars are bad. Our elm cultivars are resistant against elm Dutch elm disease so that the trees can survive. Yeah,
Cindy, is there a system where people who have like I have a lot of little burrow babies, I would love to give away,
right.
especially if I can dig them up before they grow, because, that's possible at this point. But I have a lot of little, we talked about it a little bit.
Right, right,
They're like there's this recycle site for stuff.
right,
Kind of tree cycle.
right. Well, that's a great idea. So
Oh, yeah.
in addition to, inspiring people to value trees, we're always looking for collaborators. So I'd be very interested in exploring that idea, pursuing funding to create a tree cycle, because we do, and we talked about this a little earlier. We see if you have nurtured your space, your wooded lot, it's to the point where you're getting so many volunteer oak or hickories. Suddenly out of your seed bed, you're getting Jack in the Pulpit, you're getting Virginia bluebells. You have succeeded. You have reached the pinnacle of returning your space to a wondrous, healthy area. A lot of folks can't even envision that. They don't see how they're going to get there with land choked with buckthorn. So yes, that would be wonderful, because purchasing oaks can be expensive and an impediment for folks. So I'd love to explore that idea. We have folks who say, there's so many of them, I have to mow them down, which is heartbreaking, but what can you do? So that's a great point.
Facebook group that's called Sharing Garden. And so if you had something like that, you could share it. And people share all different things, but it's really cool to see the natives and the sharing.
Excellent. So Sharing Garden out of where again? Park Ridge.
We're not from here, but you could start one in your community. And share.
Right. Nice. That's excellent. Absolutely. And we did have a comment, hard to transplant. So much like if you've ever tried to weed garlic mustard or some other really stubborn plants, it's timing. So it's waiting until some oaks, as we've seen, they will hang out about 6 inches, 8 inches. They're not ready this year. They're not ready next year. They will wait to germinate and explode. So just like weeds, you're going to wait until that energy transfers from the roots to the above ground to start blooming. And then that's going to be a lot easier to transplant. But yeah, some aren't going to survive, but if you've got that many, it's well worth the effort.
Yes. There was the mention of the Park Ridge Facebook group. There's also McHenry County Plantings.
Yes.
You're not, I'm sure
McHenry
everyone
County
knows it
Plant.
already, but that would be the one that I would put, like,
Oh, okay.
start off your tree site.
Great. McHenry County Plantings. Okay. Excellent. Any other questions? Ideas? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about Tree City USA and what that really means? Because I feel like
It's a little high level for me. I'm down here in the grass, but my counterpart absolutely works with Tree City USA. I can send more information, but it's something that we'd love all communities to be involved in. But nice.
But that's all through the Arboretum Foundation.
Yes.
Yes, they're the ones that support that.
what I'm curious about is, are they talking about the variety of trees that leads to biodiversity that you're talking about?
No,
Because I feel like it's all maples.
I think it's more
it's numbers.
quantity. Yeah. Yeah. So it's getting us there, but it's not that holistic viewpoint. Agreed.
But I
Agreed.
think it is fairly complex. The city of Woodstock is working on it right now, and it's taking them a while to get their application done.
Oh, great. Great.
So I think it's more complex than just saying you got this many trees.
Okay. Great. Yes.
I know we're really trying to wrap up, and so the last thing would be, and I think it gets more into how you, how best to plant a tree, but down, especially in my area, which is in southern part of Lisle, people like to volcano mold.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, every year they just pile on a bit more, and we're
Right.
gonna start losing, in our neighborhood, I think the next tree to go is the linden.
Oh, yeah.
They do not look good at all, but most of them have that mulch on them.
Right.
Linden,
Volcano.
because of the linden.
So thank you for mentioning that. Probably the the three biggest threats are a tree not in the right place. And then it's a tree planted too deep. Just like our own skin, we know there's the gas exchange. We're in perfect counterpart with trees. We don't want our hand buried in soil or mulch. A tree bark doesn't want to be buried in soil or mulch either. Actually, where the bark starts to turn into the roots, that root flare, that needs to be exposed. And so often that's going to be 2-3 inches deep. So there's a great door hanger in the back, English, Spanish side, that talks about don't volcano mulch. That's a great thing to politely, again, we're not alienating our neighbors, we're informing them. So we can just write a note. We need to empower our neighbors to be able to talk to landscape contractors to say, nope, I'm paying for this. I don't want the volcano mulch.
Bagels, not muffins.
Bagels, not muffins. I like that. I hadn't heard that. Great. And then just the last slide, my contact info. Again, thank you all. I really appreciate the questions, comments. Oh, no, thank you. I'm so glad I wasn't trying to talk.